Hi, I'm Amy Thompson, Director of Financial Aid for St. Joseph's College. In this presentation, I will cover financial need, the expected family contribution from the FAFSA. We'll talk about financial aid offers and understanding them. And at the very end, I'll give you some additional resources and websites. So first, I just want to explain how colleges calculate your financial need when you apply for financial aid as a student. There's two different ways to calculate need. There's federal methodology and institutional methodology. Federal methodology uses the FAFSA application and the expected family contribution. So we are going to focus on that in this presentation. The other method, called institutional methodology, would use something like the CSS profile or an institutional application to determine your financial need for that institution's own grants and scholarships. So you may see this if you're applying to some more selective private colleges. They may ask you to complete something called the CSS profile form, and they may use that and calculate a different financial need for you using institutional methodology. I can't speak to that too much because if an institution does use that formula, they've created their own for how they determine whether or not you have financial need. So what I usually recommend is if you are looking at colleges that are requesting something like the CSS profile for financial aid, always a good idea if you can look through their websites or even get a financial aid counselor on the phone from that school and ask them to explain how they use the information on that supplemental form to determine your financial need for their own institutional programs. As I mentioned, we'll be focusing on the federal methodology because every school uses that for federal financial aid, and even some private colleges use the federal methodology to determine your financial need for their own institutional programs. So to figure out whether or not a student has financial need, we take the overall cost of attendance at our institution and we subtract out your EFC, or expected family contribution. That is the number that the FAFSA calculates for you, and that is how we arrive at your financial need. And I'm going to break these terms down just so you know exactly what they are in the next couple of slides. The cost of attendance is basically what it costs to attend that college for the year. So this is going to be a variable number. No two colleges are really going to be the same, mostly because each college charges their own individual tuition and fees. You may see with, if you're applying to the SUNY colleges in New York, that they may all have the same tuition or similar tuition and fees, but they may have differences in their room and board or something of that nature, depending on where the campus is located. So even from a SUNY to a SUNY, there may be variations in the cost of attendance. And then there's definitely going to be variations if you're looking at private colleges, or if you're looking at a combination of private and public, 2-year versus 4-year. These are all things that will affect the cost of attendance that you're looking at the schools for. So the cost of attendance is comprised of what we call direct costs and also indirect costs. Direct costs are your billable costs. So these are the things that the school is actually going to charge you for and expect that you are going to pay them for certain services. So this would be your tuition, any fees. If you are going to be living on campus, this would include the cost of maybe the residence hall. And if you're going to select something like a meal plan, those are all usually things that the college is going to bill you directly for, that you either need to pay for or have financial aid to cover. But your cost of attendance is also comprised of indirect costs. And these are things that you're going to incur throughout the year that the college isn't going to bill you for, but that you will need to cover in some way, shape, or form. So think about your books, your supplies, transportation back and forth to campus, whether you're commuting and you're going back and forth on a daily or weekly basis to your classes, or even if you're living on campus, the cost of transportation to get you to and from campus, initially when school begins, and then maybe you need to come home for some holiday breaks or things like that. personal costs as well. Those are all built into your indirect costs. So when you look at the cost of attendance of a college or university, and when you start to get your financial aid offers, which we'll talk about, all this information is going to be included in there. And just because you're seeing numbers or estimates for the indirect costs, that doesn't mean that you're going to pay that to the institution or that you'll even in fact pay it at all. We just provide those estimates so that you get an idea of costs that you may face throughout the year that you'll want to make sure that you're prepared to cover. The expected family contribution is what the FAFSA application calculates for you. So when you complete your FAFSA, that's the free application for federal student aid, and that's generally the starting point to apply for financial aid at most colleges. When you complete that and enter all of the information on the form, they're going to calculate something called an EFC for you. It is the amount that they feel that the family can reasonably be expected to contribute towards that student's education during that one academic year. So they'll basically be looking at all the things that are on the FAFSA, and if you did watch my application process presentation, I cover everything that is kind of on the FAFSA that you'll need to report. So they'll look at all of that data and they'll come up with this EFC number. What's really important to know about the EFC is that it's a constant number for the year. So whatever your EFC is calculated at, whatever colleges you send your FAFSA to will receive that information. It is made up of two components. So there's, if you're a dependent student, there's a student contribution to it and a parent contribution to it. And again, that comes from all of the information that's entered on your FAFSA form. The thing to keep in mind with the EFC, it's not always a reasonable number, depending on what your income is. Sometimes these numbers can look a little high. My advice to students and parents when you see that expected family contribution number, though, is not to panic. That is not necessarily the amount of money you will have to pay to attend college. It could be actually more or less depending on the cost of the college and how much financially you receive in terms of grants and scholarships. So a good example of this would be, let's say someone who has a lot of financial resources completes the FAFSA and their EFC comes out to be, really, really high, something like $90,000 per year because they have a high income and they have assets and, they're financially well off. But for example, if that student has very high grades in high school, high test scores, a lot of activities, they could potentially wind up getting a very large scholarship to an institution, especially a private institution, and they might wind up paying nowhere near their expected family contribution out of pocket for the year. On the other hand, your EFC could come out to be something more reasonable, like maybe $5,000 to $10,000 per year, and you're thinking, okay, we might be able to afford to pay that out of pocket. But if you're looking at a private college that costs, with tuition fees and housing, maybe $40,000 or $50,000 a year, and the student doesn't receive a lot of grants and scholarships, then your out-of-pocket costs can actually be more than your expected family contribution. So again, I always say don't panic. We're going to talk about some tools at the end of this segment that you can use before you start even applying to colleges to kind of get an idea of what you might potentially qualify for. But don't panic when you see this number. It is basically a guideline for how we determine eligibility for different financial aid programs, but it's not necessarily the amount of money that you will have to come up with and pay out of pocket towards your education. So basically, your financial need is going to vary based on the cost of attendance at the college that you're looking at. We talked before that the EFC is a constant number, but the cost of attendance is a variable number. So that makes your financial need variable as well. Let's say, for example, your EFC does come out to be $10,000 per year, but you're looking at a college that costs $40,000 per year when everything is said and done with tuition, fees, housing, and all the other expenses. So your EFC is 10, the school costs 40, you would have financial need of about $30,000 there. That means you could potentially qualify for some need-based financial aid at that institution. On the other hand, if your EFC is $10,000 per year and you are applying to perhaps a two-year community college whose tuition and fees are relatively low, you could show no financial need whatsoever at that institution because your expected family contribution might actually be higher than the cost to go to that school for the year. So you might not qualify for any need-based financial aid at that particular institution. So this will all vary from institution to institution. Generally, the colleges will calculate this for you. It's not something you need to figure out. I'd just like to give a little background information on how colleges go about arriving at or determining your financial need at their institution. So the role of the financial aid office in all of this is hopefully to help you through the process. I do always recommend that if you have any questions, at any point during the process, whether you're still in the process of applying or you have applied and you're not sure what happens next, or you've applied and received your financial aid offer but you don't understand something on it, definitely contact the financial aid office and make sure you get those questions answered. We are here to help you through the process. But basically, any school that you apply to admission for and complete all the financial aid applications for, we are going to take everything that you send to us, including your FAFSA. If it's a New York school, we'll also look at your TAP application from New York State. And if it is a private college and is requesting something else like the CSS profile, we will look at that as well. And we will basically put together a financial aid offer. These used to be called award letters or award packages. They may also be called a notification or a financial aid offer. Some colleges are calling them student finance plans now. So we all, again, do things a little differently. They may have a different name, but basically they are all going to get to the same purpose, which is to notify the student of what he or she is eligible for at that particular school. So typically, again, they'll all look a little different, but you'll usually see grants and scholarships towards the top of the offer if you're receiving a paper offer in the mail. And then you might be offered something like a work study position in the middle. And then usually if the institution is going to offer you the federal student loans that you're eligible for, those will usually be packaged at the bottom. Again, every school does do things a little differently, so you do want to check with each one if you have any questions. I know that sometimes community colleges don't package student loans. If you generally are eligible for them, if you want them, you have to reach out and inquire about them. Other colleges will just put them right on the financial aid offer for you to see. And then there's other things like the Parent Plus loan that might not be packaged, really at a lot of schools anymore don't generally offer that on the letter, but it is a program they participate in and that you are eligible to apply for if you'd like to. Usually that information will be included in the packet. Also in the packet will be all of the information on the cost of attendance, which I just went over. So there will be, it might be estimated when you first start to receive them because sometimes schools don't actually set their tuition until a little bit later in the spring, but it should have at least a good estimate of what the tuition is going to cost, what the fees are going to be. Again, if there's going to be a residence hall or a meal plan, that information will be included as well. And then it will also include those estimates for the indirect costs that I was talking about, like books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses, and things of that nature. It will have further instructions in it about what your next steps are. So once you have reviewed all your financial aid offers and compared them to one another, you will then make a decision about what school you are going to be attending, and then you will follow the instructions of that particular institution about how you go about accepting your offer. If you do wish to borrow student loans, there will be instructions on how to complete that process through the school, as well as completing the master promissory note and first-time borrower student loan entrance counseling at the government site as well. That will all be included in there as well. So basically, take a really good look at everything, read everything over, and any questions at all that you have, please make sure that you get those answered from the individual colleges that you're dealing with. Just a quick little chart here on how to sort of compare costs. So, you may be getting offers from a couple of different colleges, and those offers may look different and the costs of the college may be different. So I find a really easy way to break it down is to make a spreadsheet that looks similar to the one that I have on the screen here. You basically can make a column for each college, and then down the left-hand side, you would list your direct costs, like your tuition and fees and room and board. And then under that, you can also populate what you think you might spend on books, transportation, personal expenses. Um, if you don't need to account for those things because, I don't know, let's say you have savings or maybe the family can help the student with some of those little expenses throughout the year, then that's up to you whether or not you want to include them in the cost comparison. But you definitely want to make sure that you're at least comparing the direct costs at the top so that you know what's going to be billed by the college or university, what type of financial aid you're getting, and what your out-of-pocket cost is going to be. And then basically at the bottom, I've done the total direct costs, which is your sticker price. Again, that's what the school's going to charge you. If you need to build in the indirect costs, you can do that as well. And then you come up with your total cost in the pink bar more towards the middle of the screen. Then you would take a look at the financial aid offer that the school has given you, and you would populate in your grants and your scholarships. And then if you're going to utilize the student loans, you can populate those in as well. And then basically you would deduct those items of financial aid from your total cost to come up with your net price. And you can kind of break it out two ways, which is what I did. I did the direct net price, which again is just the tuition and fees and room and board if there is any. And then I did the net price on the total cost, which includes the indirect costs that you might face as well. So this is a really good way to compare colleges, and I actually do have a link on one of the resource slides coming up of a website that you can use to kind of do some of this comparison between your costs as well. So you can see up at the top too, I have St. Joe's listed and then just made up two colleges there on the right. And I left room and board blank on St. Joseph's and College ABC, and you would do that if the student is going to be living at home and commuting. But then on University XYZ all the way on the right, I did that one as if it were a campus that's farther away where the student would be staying in a residence hall. So I populated that room and board cost because you want to make sure you take that into consideration when you're doing your comparison. A couple of resources for you. Financial aid is a very individual process. I always say that when I meet with students and families. No two students are going to have the exact same process or be offered the exact same financial aid offer. It's really a very individual process. So here are some resources coming up in this section that can kind of help you through the process and help you figure out what schools might be right for you in general to apply to from an admission standpoint, and then also what schools might be affordable for you to attend from a financial aid standpoint. So on the web, if you go to collegescorecard.ed.gov, which the URL is down in the bottom left there, you can look up basically on any college in the country something called the College Scorecard, which will give you the exact same information about each college so that you can compare it to each other in sort of an apples to apples manner. So this is what our scorecard looks like, and I kind of have everything jumbled on the screen next to each other, but it'll be a little bigger when you look on the website. And the section you see on the right with the costs and the graduation and retention rates, that will actually be on the bottom when you go on the website, but all that information will be there. So what you can find out by visiting the College Scorecard, you can find out the graduation rate of the institution, which is an important thing to know. You want to know that the school that you're picking is doing a fairly good job of getting students to complete their degree in a timely manner, because if they're not, it could cost you an extra semester or an extra year, or you might not perhaps finish the degree at all if they're not doing a really good job with that. So these are important things to look at. And this College Scorecard also gives you the average salary after students complete, and it will do it by major, so you can kind of click on that area and play around with that, and it'll show you what the low and the high is. And then the other really important feature is the average annual cost. So We were talking about the cost of attendance before and what the sticker price is with tuition and fees. Oftentimes, when you're looking at the sticker price of a college, that's not what every student winds up paying out of pocket, especially with private colleges. Private colleges especially will discount that tuition in some way through grants and scholarships. And even at the SUNYs and the CUNY, students may be qualifying for things like Pell Grants and TAP grants from the state, and there are some scholarship programs there. So it's really important to take a look at this and see what the average annual cost that students are paying out of pocket is. So ours is listed there. You can see our tuition and fees for the year are much higher than that. And then that would be after financial aid is deducted and sort of the average annual out-of-pocket cost. So a really good thing to know, and you can compare that again if you're looking at 5, 6, 7 different colleges. You can take a look at that number and compare it across the board. And then all of the things on the right hand of the screen, as I mentioned, will be on the bottom of the website, but you can expand on each one of those sections to get more detail about the costs, about the graduation and retention rates, about financial aid, about the average debt students are borrowing. In addition, you can also find information about the fields of study or majors available, what the student body kind of looks like, and test scores and acceptance information. So if you're really just starting the search process, this is a really good place to look to kind of get an idea of what school might be a right fit for you. And then we also have something called net price calculators. Every college is required to have one of these on their website. So you can take a look around on the website. Some schools display it very prominently on their homepage. Other schools, it might be on the admissions page or a financial aid web page. They're definitely not all located in the same spot, but take a look around for these. If you can't find it for some reason, the best place to call would be the financial aid office and ask them where the information is located. They should be able to steer you in the right direction if you're not having any luck finding it on your own. But basically what these will do, they will allow the student to enter some pretty basic demographic information, as well as some basic academic information. So, GPA in high school, test scores, things of that nature, if they've taken a test or are taking a test, that can all be entered into the net price calculator. And then they will also ask for some very basic family income information. Once you populate all of that, so this is something that the parent and the student may want to do together. Once that's all populated, you will actually get a quick little estimate of the type of financial aid that you might be able to expect to receive at that particular institution. So that's really helpful because it might give you an idea about whether or not you would get a merit scholarship at that institution, or whether that school might offer something like a need-based financial aid grant that you might get. And then as well, it usually gives you the federal and the state financial aid that you're eligible for. So it'll kind of give you an early estimate of what you might receive. Please do just keep in mind it is only an estimate. If you fill this out and it looks amazing, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you will wind up getting. It is based on an outdated academic year. So it's looking at a little bit of data that's a little bit older from a past academic year and students who fit those profiles. So it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it will give you an early estimate that you might qualify for something, if you're not at all sure of what you may or may not qualify for. This is definitely something that you want to check out. And then lastly, we just have some resources. I've listed most of the websites that I think people need to know. Any information you're looking for on federal financial aid or federal student aid programs can be found at studentaid.gov. The FAFSA itself can be completed at studentaid.gov as well, and I have the direct URL there for you. And there is something as well called the Financial Aid Toolkit that just has a ton of different resources. Big Future is another great resource. This is something that the College Board does put out. They are the same organization that administers the SAT exam, but they do have something called bigfuture.college board, which kind of walks you through the scholarship and college selection process. And then they also have a listing. College Board does also provide a net price calculator to schools. So they have a listing of every school that uses their net price calculator on their website as well. So you can see if you can find it there. If the school doesn't use this one, again, just check the individual college's website. You should be able to find their net price calculator somewhere on their website. Just a few more resources for you. College comparison tools, College Navigator, if you have not checked that out yet, is a great resource. Or if any juniors or parents of juniors are watching this and you're not actually ready to go through the financial aid process until the student's a senior and you're still looking, College Navigator is a great resource. You can compare colleges side by side and get breakout information on their majors, the size of their student enrollment, their financial aid, their average debt. All of that information is available on College Navigator. And bigfuture.collegeboard.org, again, with the / compare colleges, will let you compare colleges side by side if you are trying to still go through that search process. Information can be found about the college financing plan, which is something that the U.S. Department of Education requires that schools give to first-time students when they're applying for financial aid. So in addition to your financial aid offers that you're going to get from the colleges, included with that will also be something called the college financing plan, which will kind of lay everything out in the same format. So you'll see that there. And if you click on that link, you can see what that looks like, because every college should be providing you something like that as well. And then the award letter comparison tool. This is really a really good link. This will kind of give you a tool, sort of like the spreadsheet that I showed a few slides ago, about how to compare and contrast the costs and financial aid at different colleges that you are looking at after you get your financial aid offers. And then I've just listed here some scholarship search tools. So again, these are external scholarship sites that students can look at. As early as the junior year in high school, really, you can start signing up for these, and it will email you when deadlines are coming up and keep you in mind when new scholarships are added that you might fit the profile for. So definitely never too early to start looking there. I think the junior year is a great time to start looking at those sites. And as a senior, if you haven't started looking yet, I recommend that you do that right away, because some of the deadlines do actually creep up a little bit early in fall of the senior year. So you definitely want to take a look at those. And then the New York State Aid website, hesc.ny.gov, that will give you all the information you need to know about New York State financial aid programs. If you have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to contact me. My email address is althompson@sjcny.edu. Thank you so much and have a great day.